Imagine waking up on your 50th birthday and just suddenly realizing your body's internal cancer-fighting army had its budget slashed by like 40%.
Right. The soldiers are all still there. The weapons are in the armory.
Yeah, exactly. But suddenly the communication lines are failing or, the radar is glitching and the supply lines have just completely stalled out.
It's a really jarring biological reality.
It is. But today we are actually looking at a 30-year Harvard study that reveals exactly how to fund that army back up to 100%. So welcome to today's deep dive into the source material.
We have a pretty monumental stack of clinical data to get through today.
We really do. And it's curated primarily from two medical veterans who, interestingly, have spent decades looking at this from completely different angles. So we have an oncologist with 27 years of cancer prevention research and a cardiothoracic surgeon who's spent about 15 years in the operating room.
And honestly, the convergence of those two distinct fields is what makes this data so compelling. I mean, you have an oncologist looking at cellular mutation,
Right.
and then a cardiovascular surgeon looking at systemic blood flow and inflammation.
But despite those totally different vantage points, they've both mapped out the exact same biological reality regarding how we age.
Yeah, and crucially, how our internal defense mechanisms really begin to falter after a very specific chronological milestone.
Exactly. So our mission today is to dig into these specific, daily interventions they've laid out for us. We aren't talking about vague wellness advice here like eat your greens and try to relax.
No, not at all. We are talking about targeted mechanical actions that have been clinically shown to drastically reduce cancer risk in adults over 50.
And the anchor for all of this is what our sources called the 61% paradigm shift, which is just a massive number.
It really is. And this brings us to that landmark 2022 study from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. It was published in JAMA Oncology.
Oh, right.
And the methodology of this study is, it's critical to understand because it's not just some small-scale, short-term observation.
Right. They use data from the Nurses' Health Study and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study, right?
Exactly. Encompassing between 116,000 and 135,000 adults.
Right.
And they tracked these individuals for nearly 3 decades.
3 decades. I mean, 30 years of tracking. That means they are sending out massive, really detailed dietary and lifestyle questionnaires every 2 years.
Taking blood panels, yeah.
Yeah, and cross-referencing all of that with national cancer registries. So this isn't just a survey. It's a massive longitudinal biological audit.
And the statistical power of a cohort that size means they can really strip away the noise. They can control for genetics, environmental factors, baseline health.
Right.
And the finding they arrived at is staggering.
Yeah.
Individuals who consistently practiced a specific cluster of daily lifestyle habits reduced their overall cancer risk by up to 61%.
61%. That is the difference between a terrifying diagnosis and living a long, really healthy life. But, reading through these notes, the question that just keeps echoing for me is, well, why 50? What is happening in human biology at that specific age that makes these habits suddenly so vital? Because, up until 50, we seem to get away with a lot more, right?
Yeah, we really do. And the biological context is everything here. When you cross into your 50s, it's not simply that your metabolism, loosely slows down.
Right, it's more specific than that.
Much more. You experience a highly specific, measurable decline in cellular defense mechanisms that previously just ran on autopilot.
Like what, specifically?
Well, for instance, your DNA mismatch repair enzymes, which are basically the microscopic machinery that fixes daily genetic errors, their efficiency just drops.
Wow.
And autophagy, which is your body's automated cellular cleanup system, it becomes really sluggish. Plus, the production of endogenous antioxidants like melatonin, well, that just drops off a cliff.
It feels like a buggy software update.
How do you mean?
Like, you download the age 50 patch, and suddenly your internal cooling fan turns off and your firewall just stops catching viruses. You haven't changed how you operate the hardware at all, but the underlying code is failing.
That's actually a highly accurate way to frame it.
Yeah.
In your 20s and 30s, your body was running all those anti-cancer programs seamlessly in the background.
Right.
But now, because of these biological shifts, You can no longer rely on those automated systems. You have to consciously step in and, manually flip the defensive switches.
So we essentially need to apply the developer patches to our own code.
Exactly.
And to do that logically, I feel like we should probably start at the very beginning of the day. Like, if our internal systems are suddenly underfunded and glitching, what is the very first biological action we need to take when our feet hit the floor in the morning?
Well, the initial priority really addresses a fundamental yet completely invisible biological deficit.
Mhm.
Our sources highlight that as adults cross the threshold of 55, they undergo neurological change regarding interoceptive thirst sensitivity.
Yeah, I struggled with that term in the reading. Interoceptive thirst sensitivity. Is that like a problem in the throat or is it happening in the brain?
It's primarily neurological. It originates in the hypothalamus.
Okay, got it.
The hypothalamus is responsible for monitoring the osmolarity of your blood, which basically means how concentrated your blood is.
Right, the water to salt ratio, kind of.
Exactly. In youth, if you lose a little water, the hypothalamus immediately triggers a really powerful sensation of thirst.
Right, you get thirsty, you drink water. Simple.
But as we age, the sensitivity of those receptors blunts. There was actually a study from the University of Barcelona that demonstrated this.
Oh, what did they find?
They showed that because of this blunted signal, adults over 60 are chronically operating at 8 to 12% below optimal cellular hydration.
Wow. So they are literally walking around perpetually dehydrated, but their brain just isn't sending the signal to drink.
Right. They literally don't feel thirsty.
That's wild. But aside from dry skin or maybe a headache, why does our cardiothoracic surgeon source care so much about a slight drop in water volume? Like, how does that tie into cancer?
Because that lack of water completely sabotages the lymphatic system.
Ah,
The lymphatic system is this vast network of vessels and nodes that runs parallel to your bloodstream. Functionally, it is the body's internal garbage collection network.
I love that analogy, the garbage truck.
Yeah. Every single day, your cells are metabolizing energy, and in the process, they generate waste. This includes damaged proteins, dead cellular matter, and critically fragmented or mutated DNA.
The bad stuff.
Exactly. So your lymphatic system deploys white blood cells like macrophages to sweep all of this up and transport it away to be filtered out.
But the catch is that this entire network is a fluid-based system, right?
Entirely. Lymph fluid is primarily made of water. So if you are chronically dehydrated by 10%, the viscosity of your lymph fluid thickens.
It gets sludgy.
Very sludgy. The flow rate just plummets.
I keep picturing this neighborhood where everyone diligently puts their cellular trash out on the curb every single night.
Right.
But the garbage truck, the lymphatic system, has no gas. Like, it has no water to operate.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happened.
So the truck just sits there in the street, the trash sits there, and it just begins to rot in the sun.
And that biological rotting is exactly what we call chronic low-grade systemic inflammation.
Okay, wow.
When damaged cells and mutated DNA fragments aren't flushed out, the immune system remains in this constant state of low-level alarm.
Like a siren going off all the time.
Exactly. And modern oncology points to chronic inflammation as one of the primary drivers of cancer initiation. It's heavily implicated in colon, bladder, and kidney cancers.
You know, you mentioned inflammatory markers in the notes, specifically something called CRP.
Yes.
Wait, what exactly is CRP measuring? Is it like a biological smoke detector?
That is a perfect analogy.
Yes.
CRP stands for C-reactive protein. It's a protein synthesized by the liver, and the liver releases it into the bloodstream exclusively in response to inflammation.
So if your CRP levels are high,
It means there is a fire burning somewhere in your tissues, even if you can't actually feel it.
man, and the data linking water intake to putting out that fire is just wild. Like, the Harvard Nurses' Health Study looked at this mechanism specifically, right?
They did, yeah.
They found that women who drank more than 5 glasses of water a day had a 45% lower risk of colon cancer compared to those who drank 2 or fewer.
45%.
Almost cutting the risk in half just by, fueling the garbage truck.
But our sources really emphasize that the timing of this hydration is just as important as the volume. Like, the protocol isn't just to casually sip water over a 12-hour period.
Right, you need a mechanical flush.
Exactly. The clinical recommendation is 16 to 20 ounces of filtered water,
Yeah,
ideally room temperature or cool, but not ice cold the exact moment you wake up.
like before coffee, before breakfast.
Before anything. because you've just got 8 hours without fluid, and the trash is piled up all night.
Right. You are providing the immediate hydrostatic pressure needed to kickstart a stalled lymphatic system.
Yes. And furthermore, research from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden offers this really powerful synergy here.
Oh, I remember this. Because the lymphatic system doesn't have a central pump like the heart does.
Correct. It relies entirely on the mechanical contraction of your muscles to push the fluid through its one-way valves.
So if you drink the water, but just stay sitting in bed.
The truck has gas, but the driver is asleep.
I love that. The driver is asleep.
Yeah. The Karolinska study showed that pairing immediate morning hydration with just 10 minutes of light movement, walking around the house, doing some light stretching, increases lymphatic flow by 40%.
40% just for walking to the kitchen and stretching a bit? That's incredible. Actually, our source shared a clinical case study in the notes about a patient named Harold that illustrates this perfectly.
Oh, right. Harold from Dallas.
Yeah, Harold is 69, and he came in for a routine cardiovascular checkup. But his blood work showed his CRP levels, that smoke detector for inflammation, were just alarmingly high.
And when they audited Harold's daily routine, he admitted he barely drank water because of that blunted interoceptive thirst we discussed earlier.
Right, he literally wasn't thirsty.
So he relied entirely on a few cups of coffee and maybe a single glass of water at dinner.
And the amazing thing is, they didn't put him on an anti-inflammatory drug. They didn't even overhaul his diet yet.
No, they just simply had him drink 20 ounces of water first thing in the morning and another large glass before his main meals.
And 60 days later, his CRP levels had dropped by 22%. The inflammation subsided because the garbage was finally being taken out.
It really is the ultimate foundational step. But, we have to recognize that having a clean, functioning internal highway system is only the baseline.
Right, it's just the start.
If your lymphatic system is the garbage truck taking the cellular trash away, your bloodstream is the delivery truck bringing supplies in.
Which naturally makes me wonder, what are we actively putting into that delivery truck that's creating so much cellular garbage in the first place?
Good question.
Because if we're flushing the system, we really need to look at what we're feeding the cells. And that brings us to the discussion on sugar, insulin, and a specific molecule called IGF-1.
Yeah, this is huge.
Yeah.
When the general public thinks about refined sugar, the primary concern is usually weight gain or metabolic syndrome.
Sure, calories and waistlines.
But through an oncological lens, the cellular reality of sugar consumption is much more insidious. Sugar in and of itself doesn't actually possess the direct chemical structure of a carcinogen.
Wait, really? It's not inherently a carcinogen?
No, but its mechanism of action creates a highly permissive environment for cancer to thrive.
Okay, I see. The sources focus heavily on what happens immediately after you eat a refined carbohydrate or a concentrated sugar. It requires this massive insulin spike from the pancreas to pull that glucose out of the blood and into the cells.
Right.
But wait, why does insulin become such a huge danger as we cross that 50-year mark?
Because of a gradual physiological shift known as insulin resistance.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Over decades of consuming modern, highly processed diets, your cell receptors actually become desensitized to insulin. They literally downregulate the number of receptors on their surface.
So the cell is basically putting its hands over its ears and ignoring the insulin.
Exactly. But the glucose is still trapped in the bloodstream, which is highly toxic.
Right, high blood sugar is dangerous.
So the pancreas has to compensate. It pumps out significantly higher volumes of insulin just to force the cells to pay attention.
Wow.
Which means you end up walking around with chronically elevated levels of circulating insulin.
And insulin isn't just a polite little transport vehicle for sugar, is it? Like our oncology source points out that insulin is a powerful anabolic hormone.
Yes, it's a growth signal.
I think of it like a loudspeaker floating through your bloodstream. When insulin levels are massive, it's constantly screaming, grow, multiply, divide, to every single cell it touches.
That's a great way to visualize it. Normal, healthy cells have regulatory mechanisms. They hear that grow signal, but they check their internal blueprints, realize they don't actually need to divide right now, and they just ignore the command.
But a mutated cell, like a precancerous cell.
A precancerous cell has lost those regulatory brakes. So when a cancer cell hears insulin screaming grow, it responds aggressively. It takes the signal and begins to proliferate.
Man. But insulin isn't acting alone in this, is it? The notes emphasize that insulin brings a highly dangerous friend to the party.
Yes, it does. When insulin levels are chronically high, the liver responds by increasing the production of a hormone called IGF-1. which stands for insulin-like growth factor 1.
And the sources refer to IGF-1 as the fertilizer.
It is an incredibly potent growth factor. Now, in our youth, high IGF-1 is essential.
Right, for growing up.
Exactly. It's what allows a child to grow taller, builds bone density, develops muscle mass. But after the age of 50, physical growth has ceased.
We're done growing.
Right. So if you have a rogue mutated cell sitting quietly in your colon or your prostate, and you flood the system with IGF-1, it acts exactly like pouring concentrated liquid fertilizer directly onto a weed.
It doesn't plant the weed, but it guarantees that the weed's going to take over the garden.
Precisely. And the epidemiological data supporting this mechanism is chilling. Our sources cite a massive 2020 study out of Oxford University.
What did they look at?
They analyzed the blood biomarkers of over 400,000 individuals over several years. And the researchers found that participants with the highest circulating levels of IGF-1 had a 35% increased risk of colorectal cancer.
35%, just from the presence of this growth factor floating around.
Yes.
And I saw in the notes it was linked to a 25% increase in prostate cancer risk as well. So the mechanism seems completely universal, regardless of the organ.
It's systemic fertilizer.
So the intervention here is pretty clear. We have to cut the enemy's supply lines by managing the insulin spike.
Right. The clinical recommendation is keeping added refined sugars strictly under 25 grams a day.
Which means scrutinizing food labels, like really reading them.
Eliminating sugar-sweetened beverages entirely, and swapping fruit juices for whole, intact fruit.
You know, I always hear about the whole fruit thing. Is the sugar in an apple really that different from the sugar in a glass of apple juice? I mean, sugar is sugar, right?
Well, chemically, the fructose is similar, but the biological delivery system is entirely different.
Okay, how so?
When you eat an apple, the sugars are bound within a complex matrix of dietary fiber.
Right.
That fiber physically slows down gastric emptying and delays the absorption of sugar into the intestinal wall. The resulting insulin release is slow, steady, and very manageable.
Because your body has to work to break it down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you drink apple juice, the fiber has been completely pulverized or removed.
Oh, so it just hits you all at once?
Yes. The sugar hits your bloodstream in a tidal wave, demanding that massive, dangerous insulin and IGF-1 spike.
That makes total sense. And our oncologist source offers a really great biological hack here. He notes that if you are craving something sweet, berries are the absolute optimal choice.
Yeah, the berry hack.
Not just because they are lower in sugar, but because they contain specific polyphenols like anthocyanins that actively improve insulin sensitivity at the cellular receptor level.
It's amazing.
You are actually fixing the cell's hearing so the pancreas doesn't have to shout as loudly.
It's a brilliant dual-action intervention. You are lowering the toxic load while actively repairing the biological machinery.
Right.
But, managing fuel is ultimately a defensive strategy.
True.
If we really want to understand how our body actively mounts an offense against mutations, we have to examine the physical structure of our internal barriers.
Right, because starving a bad cell doesn't matter if your defensive walls are crumbling to begin with.
Exactly.
And that brings us to a really fascinating part of the research regarding the architecture of the gut and the DNA repair systems. The sources frame this as structural sabotage versus gut armor.
Right, so to grasp the concept of structural sabotage, we first need to understand the concept of a DNA proofreader.
A proofreader, like for a book.
Very similar. Throughout your life, your cells are constantly dividing and copying their genetic code. The human genome is incredibly complex, containing billions of base pairs.
Yeah.
And during this copying process, mistakes, basically typos in the genetic code, happen constantly.
And those typos are mutations, right, which are the seeds of cancer.
Yes, exactly. But in a healthy system, you have enzymes called DNA polymerases and specific mismatch repair proteins. And they act as biological proofreaders.
Okay, what do they do?
They travel along the newly copied DNA strand, actively scanning for errors. If they find a mismatched base pair, they excise the error and patch in the correct code before the cell even divides.
So it's like an automated quality control department.
Precisely.
But, oh man, here comes the age 50 software bug again. Our sources state that after 50, the efficiency of these mismatch repair enzymes drops by roughly 30 to 40%.
Yeah.
The proofreaders are getting tired and they are just missing typos.
And that natural decline is concerning enough on its own, but the real danger arises from how our modern environment interacts with that specific vulnerability.
What do you mean?
Right at the moment when your genetic proofreaders are struggling, the standard Western diet introduces a massive sabotage agent, Ultra-processed foods.
Okay, so we're talking about packaged pastries, fast food, processed deli meats, artificially flavored snack chips, all that stuff.
All of it, yeah.
But mechanistically, how does a packaged snack cake actually sabotage a microscopic DNA proofreader? Like, what's the physical connection there?
The link lies in a class of chemical compounds called AGEs, which stands for Advanced Glycation End Products.
AGEs. Okay, how are those formed?
Well, glycation is a chemical reaction that occurs when sugar molecules bind haphazardly to proteins or fats without the regulation of an enzyme.
Just sticking together randomly.
Yes. And this happens extensively during the high-heat industrial processing of foods. So when you consume these ultra-processed foods, you flood your bloodstream with these AGEs.
And they are bad news.
Very. They're highly reactive, highly inflammatory molecules.
And what do they do when they actually reach the cells?
They physically cross-link with proteins inside your body. They stiffen them and completely alter their function.
Oh, wow.
Crucially, research indicates that these inflammatory environments impair the function of your DNA repair proteins.
So wait, not only is your proofreader naturally tired from aging,
You are actively throwing sand in its eyes by consuming heavily processed glycated foods.
you are blinding the security guard right when the bank is being robbed. That is crazy.
It is.
And the epidemiological numbers on this are just staggering. There was a 2023 study from Imperial College London that analyzed nearly 200,000 adults over a decade.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge data set.
Right. And they found that the cohort with the highest consumption of ultra-processed foods experienced a 32% jump in colorectal cancer risk
32%.
and a 19% higher risk of breast cancer.
And what is really vital to understand about that Imperial College study is that the researchers controlled for body mass index.
Oh, so it wasn't just about weight.
Exactly. This risk was completely independent of obesity. The pathology wasn't driven solely by the fact that processed foods cause weight gain.
Right.
The chemical structure of the food itself, the AGEs and the preservatives, were directly driving the genetic damage.
Man, our sources actually shared a patient case study that really brings us down to earth. Sandra, a 58-year-old school administrator.
Right.
She came into the clinic terrified because her older sister had recently been diagnosed with colon cancer.
And when they looked at Sandra's diet, I mean, she wasn't binge-eating junk food all day.
No, her diet was totally normalized to our modern culture. Like she ate a bowl of fortified boxed cereal for breakfast, a processed deli meat sandwich on commercial bread for lunch, and packaged crackers for a snack.
It seems so normal, right?
Yeah.
But her diet was entirely comprised of industrial formulations. And as a result, her inflammatory biomarkers, specifically her CRP, which we discussed earlier, and another marker called interleukin-6, were elevated far above the healthy baseline.
Her internal environment was basically a flashing red light for cellular damage. But the intervention was surprisingly straightforward. Over 12 months, they simply replaced the ultra-processed staples with whole single-ingredient equivalents.
Right, simple swaps.
She swapped the boxed cereal for steel-cut oats. She replaced the processed deli meat with roasted chicken breasts.
And by removing the AGEs and those industrial emulsifiers, she allowed her immune system to finally recalibrate.
Yeah, her CRP levels plummeted by 44%. Her interleukin-6 returned to a normal range, and a subsequent colonoscopy revealed a complete reversal of the low-grade mucosal inflammation her gastroenterologist had previously seen.
She literally stopped blinding her DNA proofreaders.
She really did. But the second half of this equation is about actively building armor, because if stopping processed food removes the sabotage, how do we physically fortify the walls? The sources point really heavily to the gut microbiome and this phenomenon called leaky gut.
Yeah, so as we enter our 60s, a structural degradation actually occurs in the intestinal lining. Your gut wall is lined with these epithelial cells held together by proteins called tight junctions.
Okay, junctions.
You can visualize this lining kind of like a medieval castle wall.
I love the analogies.
In your youth, the stone blocks are perfectly mortared together. Nutrients are carefully absorbed, but pathogens and toxins are kept completely out.
But as we age, that mortar begins to dry out and crack, right? The wall becomes porous.
Exactly. The tight junctions loosen. And when that happens, compounds that really belong in the digestive tract begin leaking into the bloodstream.
Oh, that sounds bad.
The most dangerous of these are bacterial endotoxins known as lipopolysaccharides, or LPS.
I've definitely heard of LPS. What exactly are they?
LPS are structural components found on the outer membrane of certain gram-negative bacteria in your gut. When they stay in the gut, They're relatively harmless. But when they leak through that porous wall into your bloodstream, your immune system recognizes them as a massive threat.
Like invaders breaching the wall.
Exactly. And it launches a systemic inflammatory response. This condition, called metabolic endotoxemia, is a primary driver of the silent chronic inflammation that fuels cancer growth.
So we desperately need to patch the mortar on the castle wall. And our sources have an absolute insistence here on the daily consumption of fermented foods.
Yes.
Things like unpasteurized sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, kefir, and plain yogurt. But why these foods specifically?
Because fermented foods are teeming with live, beneficial probiotic bacteria.
Right.
When you introduce these bacteria into your gut, they feed on the dietary fiber you consume. And through the process of fermenting that fiber, they produce metabolic byproducts called short-chain fatty acids.
And the absolute superstar of these fatty acids is something called butyrate.
Butyrate is a biological miracle molecule. First, it acts as the primary fuel source for the cells lining your colon. It tightens those junctions and physically repairs the leaky gut wall. It stops the LPS toxins from escaping.
But butyrate doesn't just patch the wall, right? The research in the notes shows it actively goes on the offensive. Like, our sources describe butyrate as a quiet, highly efficient security guard.
It is an incredibly sophisticated mechanism. Butyrate has the ability to enter precancerous cells in the colon and act as a histone deacylase inhibitor.
Okay, that's a big term. In simpler words.
In simpler terms, it alters the way the mutated cell reads its own DNA, effectively forcing the cancer cell to trigger its own apoptosis.
Apoptosis meaning programmed cell death.
Yes.
So butyrate literally commands the mutated cell to self-destruct before it can even multiply. The security guard doesn't sound an alarm or create massive inflammation. He just quietly hands the troublemaker a biological pink slip and escorts them out the side door.
That is exactly what happens, and the clinical impact is undeniable.
Yeah, let me look at the notes here. There was a comprehensive meta-analysis from Cambridge University evaluating over 1.9 million participants. And they found that individuals who consumed fermented foods daily had a 34% lower risk of developing colorectal cancer.
34% lower risk.
That's huge. But, and this is a big but, if you are listening to this and immediately planning to run to the supermarket to buy a jar of sauerkraut, you need to pause.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Because there is a massive trap here that the sources explicitly warn about.
The commercial processing trap.
Right. If you walk down the middle aisles of a standard grocery store and pick up a jar of sauerkraut that is just sitting at room temperature on a shelf, it has been pasteurized.
And pasteurization basically means they boiled it. Right.
They used extreme heat to kill all the bacteria, so the product is shelf-stable and won't spoil for 2 years.
Which means the heat killed all the beneficial probiotic bacteria before you even opened the jar.
You are eating dead bacteria. I mean, it will provide some fiber, and it might taste like sauerkraut, but biologically, it is entirely incapable of producing the butyrate needed to protect your gut.
So the rule is non-negotiable. You must look for the words live and active cultures on the label. And it has to be located in the refrigerated section of the store.
Exactly. The bacteria must arrive in your digestive tract alive and ready to work.
Okay, so butyrate serves as the foundational security guard for the gut perimeter. But our oncology source points us toward another naturally occurring compound that operates on a much higher systemic level.
Yes, moving from the local to the systemic.
Right. If butyrate is the local security guard, this next compound is like a highly trained sniper, specifically hunting down the masterminds behind cancer recurrence.
It really is.
I am absolutely fascinated by this next section. It honestly sounds like science fiction, but it's pure, peer-reviewed botany. We are talking about a phytochemical called sulforaphane.
Found primarily in cruciferous vegetables.
Right, like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and most potently in raw broccoli sprouts. Let's dig into the Johns Hopkins research on this. What does sulforaphane actually do?
To understand sulforaphane, we need to look at a master genetic switch inside our cells known as NRF2.
NRF2.
Okay, foundational research pioneered at Johns Hopkins University revealed that sulforaphane is the most potent naturally occurring activator of the NRF2 pathway.
A master switch. How does that pathway work?
Well, in a resting state, NRF2 is bound to a repressor protein called KEAP1. And KEAP1 basically anchors it in the fluid of the cell and degrades it.
It's locked up.
Right. But when sulforaphane enters the cell, it physically alters the shape of that KEAP1 protein.
Okay.
The NRF2 is suddenly released, allowing it to travel directly into the nucleus of the cell. And once inside the nucleus, NRF2 binds to specific sequences of DNA called antioxidant response elements.
And what happens when it binds to those elements?
It simultaneously turns on the expression of over 200 highly protective genes.
200.
Yes. These genes govern the body's most powerful detoxification pathways, massive endogenous antioxidant production, and crucially, they vastly accelerate the repair of damaged DNA.
So it's like hitting the emergency broadcast button that mobilizes the entire cellular fire department all at once.
That's a great analogy.
But let me guess, the aging process messes with the system too.
Unfortunately, yes. Clinical studies show that NRF2 activity naturally declines by approximately 40% between the ages of 50 and 70.
Wow.
Your cellular emergency response network basically falls asleep at the switch. Small genetic mutations that would have been instantly repaired at age 30 are suddenly just slipping through unnoticed.
So when you consume sulforaphane, you are essentially throwing a bucket of ice water on the head of security. You are waking up this dormant defense system.
Exactly.
But the NRF2 activation isn't even the most aggressive thing sulforaphane does, is it? Because our sources highlighted a study from the Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center that is truly mind-blowing regarding something called cancer stem cells.
Oh, the stem cell data is incredible.
Yeah.
This is a really critical distinction in modern oncology. You see, tumors are not homogeneous lumps of identical cells. They actually have a hierarchy. Traditional chemotherapy and radiation are highly effective at destroying rapidly dividing cells. They wipe out the bulk of the tumor, what we might call the foot soldiers.
But the foot soldiers aren't in charge.
Exactly. Hidden deep within the tumor are cancer stem cells. These are the generals.
The generals.
They divide very slowly, which makes them highly resistant to traditional chemotherapy. So if a treatment kills 1 million foot soldiers, but leaves a handful of stem cells alive, those generals will eventually recruit a new army.
And this is the primary biological mechanism behind cancer recurrence and metastasis?
Yes.
So what did the Roswell Park study actually find about sulforaphane?
They discovered that sulforaphane has a unique biochemical ability to bypass the foot soldiers entirely and specifically target the cancer stem cells.
Whoa.
It disrupts the exact signaling pathways that allow those stem cells to renew themselves, effectively neutralizing the generals.
It takes out the masterminds. That is incredible. But just like the pasteurized sauerkraut trap, there is a massive chemistry hack you have to understand here, right?
Oh, yes. This is where most people go wrong.
If you are listening to this and thinking, great, I'll just steam a bag of frozen broccoli for dinner tonight, you are about to completely waste your time.
The preparation detail is where the vast majority of the public fails to get the benefit.
Because sulforaphane does not actually exist in a whole intact floree of broccoli. Like, it's not just sitting in the plant waiting for you to eat it.
Correct. It is an evolutionary defense mechanism of the plant.
Wait, how does that work?
Well, a whole broccoli plant contains 2 separate components, and they are stored in different cellular compartments. You have a precursor compound called glucoraphanin and an enzyme called myrosinase.
Okay, so they're kept apart.
Right. When an insect bites the plant, or when a human chews or chops it, those cell walls break.
Ah.
The precursor and the enzyme finally mix together, and it's only through that specific chemical reaction that the active sulforaphane is created.
But here is the tragedy of standard culinary practices. The myrosinase enzyme is highly heat-sensitive. The notes say it is completely destroyed at temperatures above 140 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes, which is relatively low for cooking.
Which means if you take a whole head of raw broccoli, you chop it, and immediately throw it into a pot of boiling water or a hot steamer, the heat instantly kills the myrosinase. The chemical reaction never takes place. You are eating 0 sulforaphane.
None at all.
If you spent the last 20 years boiling the absolute life out of your broccoli, I mean, don't panic. You aren't alone. But you've basically been eating dead chemistry.
Well, thankfully, our sources provide 2 highly actionable, science-backed solutions to this exact problem.
Okay, let's hear them. Option 1.
Option 1 is the chop and wait method. You finally chop your raw broccoli, and you just let it sit on the cutting board at room temperature for 40 minutes before you cook it.
40 minutes, just giving the myrosinase enzyme the time it needs to fully synthesize the sulforaphane.
Exactly.
And once the sulforaphane is created, it's heat stable, right? So then you can cook it.
Yes, once the reaction is complete, you can lightly steam or roast it without losing the benefit.
Okay. But let's be real, who has 40 minutes to wait for their broccoli on a random Tuesday night?
Very few people.
So option 2 is the ultimate synergy hack. You prepare your broccoli however you want. You steam it, which, yes, kills the native myrosinase.
Right.
But when you plate it, you sprinkle raw mustard seed powder over the hot broccoli right before you eat it.
This is a brilliant application of food science.
Explain how it works.
Raw mustard seed, which is actually in the exact same botanical family as broccoli, contains an abundant supply of its own active myrosinase enzyme.
Oh.
By introducing the raw mustard seed powder to the cooked broccoli, you effectively restore the missing enzyme.
Because you didn't cook the mustard powder.
Right. The chemical reaction happens right there in your stomach.
And the research shows this mustard seed hack multiplies the bioavailability of the sulforaphane by up to 4 times. It is literally hacking your dinner's biology.
It really is.
So we've optimized the fuel by cutting sugar and insulin spikes. We've fortified the cellular walls with butyrate. We've deployed the sulforaphane sniper. Now we really need to look at how the body actually burns its fuel.
Right. Energy metabolism.
Because apparently the way our cells use oxygen changes the entire internal environment.
It does. And to understand this mechanism, we must look back at a foundational discovery in cellular biology. In 1931, a German biochemist named Otto Warburg won the Nobel Prize in Physiology.
Oh, for the famous Warburg effect.
Yes. He observed a profound anomaly in how cancer cells metabolize energy compared to healthy cells.
What was the difference?
Healthy cells primarily generate energy through a highly efficient process called oxidative phosphorylation, which requires abundant oxygen.
Okay, oxygen is key.
Right. But Warburg discovered that cancer cells largely abandon this efficient process. Instead, they rely almost exclusively on a very primitive process called glycolysis, which is rapidly fermenting glucose for fuel.
So cancer cells are absolutely addicted to sugar, but they absolutely hate oxygen. They are terrible at using it.
Exactly. Their cellular machinery is completely optimized for a hypoxic or low oxygen environment.
So knowing this biological quirk allows us to weaponize our own physiology against them, right?
Exactly.
Which brings us to what our sources prescribe as metabolic walking.
Yes, metabolic walk.
It isn't just like taking the dog for a casual stroll. This is sustained, intentional movement designed to elevate your heart rate into a very specific zone, roughly 55 to 70% of your maximum heart rate.
Right. At that specific intensity, you can still hold a conversation, but you would find it difficult to sing a song. You are demanding sustained aerobic output from your large muscle groups.
And when you hit that zone, you trigger a dual assault on the tumor environment, don't you? First, your working muscles act like a massive sponge. They aggressively pull the leftover glucose out of your bloodstream to use for mechanical energy.
Right. You are rapidly draining the blood of the exact fuel the cancer cells are addicted to.
And simultaneously, by elevating your respiration and cardiac output, you are saturating your bloodstream and deep tissues with oxygen.
Yes. You starve them of the sugar they love, and you drown them in the oxygen they hate. It creates a completely hostile microenvironment for any precancerous cells trying to establish a foothold.
It's beautifully simple, but highly effective. And our sources also tie this into the concept of aging and our mitochondria.
Oh, right. Mitochondria are the microscopic power plants located inside almost every cell in your body.
They are responsible for processing that oxygen and creating cellular energy.
Yes, but the aging data shows that after the age of 65, humans lose up to 35% of their mitochondrial density.
35%.
Furthermore, the remaining mitochondria become dysfunctional and highly inefficient.
And mitochondrial dysfunction isn't just about, feeling tired. It is a massive driver of cellular aging and chronic disease.
Correct. But metabolic walking initiates a powerful signaling cascade. The sustained energy demand activates an enzyme called AMPK, which in turn triggers a protein called PGC1 alpha.
And what does PGC1 alpha do?
It is the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis. It literally forces your body to build brand new, highly efficient mitochondria from scratch.
Wow.
You are replacing the failing power grid of your cells with upgraded infrastructure.
The notes actually include a brilliant case study from our source about a patient named Walter. He's a 71-year-old retired architect.
Right, Walter.
Walter had just had a major scare with a high-risk precancerous polyp found during a colonoscopy. He was entirely sedentary. Like, his longest walk of the day was from his recliner to the kitchen.
So his metabolic environment was completely stagnant, high circulating glucose, low tissue oxygenation.
Exactly. And his doctor didn't put him on an extreme boot camp. They implemented one single change: a 35-minute metabolic walk 5 days a week.
And it took Walter a month just to build up the stamina to hit that 35-minute mark.
But he stuck with it. 2 years later, his follow-up colonoscopy was completely clean, and his inflammatory markers had plummeted. Walter literally told his doctor, walking feels like medicine.
Because on a molecular level, it acts as a highly targeted metabolic intervention.
And there is a highly actionable takeaway here, backed by a 2021 study from Stanford University. They found that taking a brisk 20-minute walk immediately following your heaviest meal of the day blunts the post-meal glucose spike by up to 33%.
33% just for a short walk after dinner.
You physically intercept the sugar before it can ever reach a mutated cell.
It is an elegant, highly effective strategy.
It really is.
However, as powerful as diet and movement are, there is a master lever that controls the entire system.
Okay.
You can eat the perfect fermented foods, you can activate your NRF2 with broccoli sprouts, you can walk every single day, but if your internal state is governed by chronic stress, or if you never stop digesting food, you can completely override all of those positive inputs.
Man, we have to talk about the master regulators then, the things that control the environment from the top down. Let's start with the silent saboteur, cortisol. Because we hear the phrase stress management all the time, and honestly, it sounds like a soft wellness buzzword. It sounds like, taking a bubble bath or lighting a candle.
And the relegation of stress to the wellness category is a massive disservice to public health.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. In the realm of oncology, chronic psychological stress is recognized as a measurable, potent, and aggressive driver of cellular mutation and immune suppression.
Okay, let's get into the cold, hard biology of it. Because acute, short-term stress is just an evolutionary survival mechanism, right? If a tiger chases you, your adrenal glands pump out cortisol and adrenaline, your blood pressure spikes, glucose floods your muscles, and your immune system temporarily pauses so all energy goes toward running away. That keeps you alive.
That's acute stress.
Right.
But the human body is not designed to sustain that state. In the modern world, the tiger is a massive mortgage, unresolved family grief, or a totally toxic work environment.
Right.
The stress is chronic. You are perpetually bathing your cells in cortisol.
But wait, how does a stress hormone floating in the blood actually reach into a cell's DNA and turn off cancer defenses? Like, what is the biochemical pathway there?
Well, when cortisol enters a cell, it binds to glucocorticoid receptors. That receptor complex then travels directly into the nucleus of the cell and physically alters gene transcription.
Wait, it changes how the genes are read?
Yes. Specifically, chronically elevated cortisol has been shown to downregulate the expression of the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes.
Wait, those are the famous DNA repair genes, right? The ones heavily associated with breast and ovarian cancer risk.
Yes, they are responsible for repairing double-strand breaks in your DNA.
Oh my God.
When cortisol levels are chronically high, the activity of those critical repair proteins is literally dialed down. Your DNA is breaking, and the repair crew is being told to stand down.
That is terrifying.
And it actually gets worse.
How could it get worse?
Cortisol simultaneously upregulates a completely different pathway called NF-kappa B.
I saw NF-kappa B mentioned multiple times in the research. What exactly is its function?
NF-kappa B is a protein complex that controls the transcription of DNA, cytokine production, and cell survival.
Okay.
In a healthy scenario, if a cell sustains severe DNA damage, it recognizes it as broken and initiates apoptosis. It falls on its sword for the good of the body.
But when NF-kappa B is activated by chronic stress,
it acts as an anti-apoptotic survival signal. It reaches out to that mutated, dangerous cell and essentially says, do not die, ignore the damage, keep replicating.
You are simultaneously shutting down the DNA repair crew and telling the mutated cells to multiply.
Exactly. And a 2022 study from Ohio State University measured this exact phenomenon in humans. They looked at adults over 60 who are experiencing chronic psychological stress.
What did they find?
They found that the activity of their tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, which are the specific immune cells that identify and attack tumors, was reduced by 48%.
The stress hormone literally cut the immune army's effectiveness in half.
Yes, and this physiological reality is exactly what our source encountered with his patient, David.
Oh, right, David. He was a 66-year-old retired executive. He thought he was finally enjoying a relaxed retirement, playing golf and reading. But his routine blood panels revealed a completely inverted and chaotic cortisol rhythm.
Cortisol is supposed to peak in the morning to wake you up and drop low at night. David's was low in the morning and sky high at 10 p.m.
His nervous system was stuck in a state of allostatic load. His biology was bracing for an attack that was never coming, even if he didn't consciously feel anxious.
Right. And the intervention they used wasn't pharmaceutical. They taught David a clinical breathing technique to manually hack his autonomic nervous system, specifically the 478 diaphragmatic breathing pattern.
Oh, inhaling deeply through the nose for 4 seconds, holding the breath for 7 seconds, and exhaling slowly and forcefully through the mouth for 8 seconds.
Exactly. Doing that for just 12 minutes a day stimulates the vagus nerve, which acts as the brake pedal for the entire nervous system.
It forces the body out of sympathetic fight or flight and into parasympathetic rest and digest.
Yes. And within 6 months of this daily practice, David's cortisol rhythm normalized entirely, and his blood markers for NF-kappa B, that dangerous pathway telling mutated cells to stay alive, dropped by 31%.
By managing the stress hormone, he allowed his immune system to come back online.
We did it.
But regulating the nervous system is just the first master lever. The second regulator, which our sources call the absolute cornerstone of aging defense, is dictated entirely by the clock.
Yes. We need to talk about time-restricted eating and the mechanics of a process called autophagy.
Autophagy. I've heard this term thrown around a lot lately.
Autophagy is derived from Greek, literally translating to self-eating. It is arguably the body's most profound internal diagnostic and cellular recycling program.
And there was a Nobel Prize for this, right?
In 2016, yes. A Japanese cell biologist named Yoshinori Osumi won the Nobel Prize for his discoveries, detailing the exact molecular mechanisms of autophagy.
It's an incredible concept. But how does it actually trigger? Like, what makes a cell decide to just start eating itself?
Autophagy is governed entirely by nutrient availability. When you are eating food, your cells are in a state of anabolism, which means growth and storage. They are busy processing incoming amino acids and glucose.
Okay.
But when your body enters a fasted state, which typically requires a complete cessation of caloric intake for 13 to 16 hours, the cells experience a metabolic shift.
Because the incoming supply lines have dried up, so the cell has to look inward for resources.
Exactly. The cell identifies older, misfolded proteins, dysfunctional mitochondria, and damaged organelles.
Cellular junk.
Right. It constructs a double membrane structure called an autophagosome, which acts like a biological trash bag. It engulfs the damaged cellular material, merges with a lysosome filled with digestive enzymes, and breaks the junk down into basic amino acids to be recycled into new, healthy structures.
That is so elegant. But here's the tragedy of our modern lifestyle. Because of how we eat today, a massive portion of the adult population never, ever triggers this process.
The standard modern eating window spans 15 to 16 hours a day. People wake up at 6 a.m. and immediately have coffee with milk and sugar.
Right.
They snack constantly throughout the day, eat a late dinner, and then have a handful of chips or a glass of wine at 10 p.m. while watching television.
Because there is a constant, unending influx of calories, the body is perpetually stuck in digestion and growth mode. The autophagy cleanup crew is never given the signal to start working.
And when damaged cells aren't cleaned up, they accumulate.
And accumulated cellular damage is the fundamental biological substrate of cancer.
It is.
You know, I always think of this like a bustling, high-end restaurant. As long as orders keep coming into the kitchen, the staff is frantically cooking, plating, and serving.
Right.
And in the process, the floors get covered in grease, the trash cans overflow, and the ovens get filthy. But the cooks can't stop to clean because the tickets just keep printing. It is only when you physically lock the front doors of the restaurant for 14 hours that the deep cleaning crew can finally come out of the back room. They pull the heavy stoves away from the walls, they scrub the grease off the floors, they sanitize the cutting boards. If you never close the kitchen, the grease just builds up day after day until finally there's a catastrophic fire.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the necessity of fasting. The clinical success of enforcing this kitchen closure in older adults is truly astounding.
Yeah, let's talk about the 2022 clinical trial conducted by the University of Alabama at Birmingham.
They focused on older adults who simply adopted a 14-point NEN time-restricted eating protocol.
Which means they ate all their meals within a 10-hour window, and they fasted completely, only water or black tea for 14 hours.
Right. They didn't count calories or prescribe a specific diet. They just managed the clock.
And the physiological results were remarkable. The researchers documented a 41% improvement in the expression of tumor suppressor genes.
By simply giving the body a 14-hour break from digestion, the subject's biology became 41% more effective at suppressing cancer at the genetic level.
Our source's patient, Michael, is the ultimate proof of this concept. Michael was 61 years old, with a history of developing precancerous colonic polyps. He wasn't obese, He ate a relatively decent diet, but his eating window was 16 hours long. He was a notorious late-night snacker.
And when they tested his metabolic markers, his autophagy levels were practically non-existent.
So they implemented the 14.10 protocol. He didn't change what he was eating, only when. Michael had his first meal at 8 a.m. and was instructed to take his absolute last bite of food by 6 p.m.
He locked the kitchen doors at 6 p.m.
He locked the doors. And within 12 months of this routine, his follow-up colonoscopy showed a complete resolution of the low-grade dysplasia. The precancerous polyps had regressed entirely.
His gastroenterologist was stunned, calling it highly unusual.
But it wasn't a miracle. It was just autophagy doing exactly what it evolved to do over millions of years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this naturally leads us to the final, most critical piece of the biological puzzle. Because all of these interventions, the deep cleaning of autophagy, the glucose burning from walking, the immune patrolling from sulforaphane, they all culminate and consolidate during one specific, highly vulnerable state.
Yes. We need to talk about the night shift, the architecture of oncological sleep, because what happens when we close our eyes and lose consciousness is incredibly intense on a cellular level.
The general assumption is that sleep is a passive state.
Yeah.
A time when the brain and body just shut down to rest.
Right.
But biologically, sleep is the most active, aggressive, defensive period of your entire 24-hour cycle.
Wow.
During the deep, slow-wave stages of sleep, specifically stages 3 and 4, two critical physiological events occur. First, the brain activates the lymphatic system.
The lymphatic system. We talked about the lymphatic system for the body earlier. Is this the same thing just for the brain?
Conceptually, yes. The lymphatic system was only discovered relatively recently, around 2012, by a neuroscientist named Macon Niedergard.
Okay, what does it do?
During deep sleep, the glial cells in your brain actually shrink by up to 60%.
They shrink.
Yes. And this opens up massive channels, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to rush in and literally power wash toxic proteins like amyloid beta and cellular debris right out of the brain tissue.
That is fascinating. The brain literally shrinks to let the pressure washer in.
Exactly. But beyond the brain, what is happening in the rest of the body during deep sleep?
Okay, what else is going on?
Deep sleep is the peak production window for your body's frontline immune soldiers, natural killer cells, or NK cells.
The cells whose sole job is to hunt down and destroy viruses and cancer cells.
Yes. And the deployment of these NK cells is directly tethered to a hormone that most people completely misunderstand as simply a drugstore sleep aid, melatonin.
Right. This was the detail in the research that completely blew my mind. We think of melatonin as a gummy we take to feel drowsy, but it is so much more than a sleep cue.
Melatonin is arguably one of the most powerful endogenous antioxidants known to science.
Endogenous meaning we make it ourselves.
Right. It readily crosses cell membranes and the blood-brain barrier to protect DNA from oxidative stress.
Yeah.
But more specifically to oncology, melatonin directly inhibits a process called tumor angiogenesis.
Angiogenesis. Angio meaning blood vessels, genesis meaning creation.
Exactly. When a microscopic tumor begins to grow, it quickly reaches a size where it can no longer survive on ambient nutrients alone. It secretes a protein called VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, to signal the body to build new blood vessels directly into the tumor to feed it.
It's trying to build its own supply line.
Yes. And what does melatonin do? High levels of circulating melatonin actively block the VEGF signal.
Wow.
It stops the cancers from building those blood vessels, essentially starving the tumor of oxygen and nutrients before it can even establish itself.
But here is the devastating reality of aging. The data shows that between the ages of 30 and 70, our natural melatonin production drops by up to 70%.
The pineal gland just stops producing it efficiently.
Your most powerful internal anti-cancer mechanism is running on fumes.
It is. And we actively sabotage that already depleted system with our modern environment. The presence of artificial light at night, specifically blue light from screens and LED bulbs, hits the photoreceptors in our eyes and signals the pineal gland to immediately halt melatonin production.
And the disruption is so severe that the International Agency for Research on Cancer actually classified night shift work as a probable carcinogen.
Yes. Not a risk factor, a probable carcinogen. Because chronic sleep disruption shatters this entire biological defense sequence.
This is exactly why our cardiothoracic surgeon source had to intervene with his patient Dorothy. She was a 68-year-old retired nurse who had worked the night shift for 30 years.
She had survived breast cancer, but her immune panel showed her NK cells were severely suppressed, Her protective army was completely exhausted and basically dozing off on duty.
So what did they prescribe? How do we fix the night shift architecture?
He placed her on a strict sleep recalibration protocol. First, establish a firm anchor time. You go to bed at 10:30 p.m., and crucially, you wake up at the exact same time every single day, including weekends. This stabilizes the circadian rhythm.
Okay, anchor time.
Second, the thermal environment must drop. The bedroom needs to be between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, as a drop in core body temperature is required to initiate deep, slow-wave sleep.
And third, complete and total darkness. Blackout curtains taping over the glowing lights on televisions or chargers. Any photon of light hitting your retina through your closed eyelids suppresses that precious melatonin production.
And there is a beautiful, deeply interconnected synergy here that ties this final step right back to our movement segment earlier.
Oh, I love this part.
The morning sunlight you absorb through your eyes during your metabolic walk directly anchors the master clock in your hypothalamus.
So the sunlight hitting your eyes at 8 a.m. starts a biological timer, which dictates exactly how much melatonin your pineal gland will release 14 hours later. The habits are literally talking to each other. The morning walk physically builds the nighttime armor.
It perfectly illustrates that human biology is not a series of isolated systems. It is a continuously communicating network.
Let's pull all of this together because the compounding effect of these interventions is magnificent. What we've explored today isn't just a random list of magazine health tips. It is one deeply integrated biological strategy.
It really is.
Think about the sequence we've just built. Morning hydration provides the fluid to flush the lymphatic garbage truck. Keeping refined sugar under 25 grams starves the enemy of their insulin and IGF-1 fertilizer. Eating live fermented foods produces the butyrate that patches the castle walls of the gut. Chopping your broccoli and adding mustard seeds synthesizes the sulforaphane that wakes up the NRF2 DNA repair system and snipes the cancer stem cells.
Then, a 35-minute metabolic walk burns off the excess glucose fuel, floods the tissues with oxygen, and forces the creation of new mitochondria.
Managing stress with breath work lowers the cortisol that turns off your repair genes. A 14-hour fast locks the kitchen doors so the autophagy deep cleaning crew can finally scrub the cells. And deep, dark, cold sleep deploys the natural killer cells and floods the body with angiogenesis-blocking melatonin.
As we conclude, I want to offer a note of profound clinical reassurance drawn directly from the source data. These incredible results, the 61% reduction in overall cancer risk, the dropping of inflammatory markers, the resolution of precancerous polyps, these studies were not conducted on 30-year-old professional athletes with pristine genetics.
Right. They were done on regular people in their 60s and 70s, people who had smoked in their 20s, who had been sedentary, who had eaten ultra-processed foods for decades.
The human body retains a remarkable, almost miraculous capacity to heal, adapt, and regenerate, regardless of your chronological age, when you simply provide it with the correct cellular environment.
It is genuinely never too late to push the developer patch to your own software. You just have to be willing to consciously write the code. And I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder as you go about the rest of your day.
Okay.
We've learned today that our cells are not static. They are constantly, every second, taking behavioral cues from our environment. They are listening to our light exposure, our fasting windows, the physical structure of our food, and the rhythm of our breath. If just tweaking these daily habits can rewrite our overall cancer risk by 61%, what other dormant cellular super defenses are sitting inside you right now just waiting for you to give them the right lifestyle signal to wake up?